This week's edition of NJBIA's Minding Your Business is brought to you in part by AT&T, helping family, friends, and neighbors connect in meaningful ways every day. PPAC Gladstone Bank, known nationally and in New Jersey for providing unparalleled client service, integrity, and trust for over 100 years. New Jersey's community colleges, aligning education to build an innovative workforce. Find out how your business can benefit at njpathways.org. And by New Jersey Business Magazine, providing critical information needs for New Jersey's business community for over 66 years.
Welcome to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm Bob Considine. Well, the Garden State Initiative has put out a new report detailing the impacts of New Jersey having the largest corporate business tax rate in the nation and what the state should do comprehensively to improve its CBT standing. Here to discuss this very insightful report is GSI founder and president Regina Egea. Regina, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
All right, it's been a great kind of spring for you. This is a great report.
Thanks.
People should go check it out. We'll get to where you can see it soon. But before we talk about the sunset of the CBT, let's scene set a little bit. Governor Murphy's announced that he's planning to sunset the corporate business tax surcharge, 2.5% temporary surcharge, at the end of this year. But what does your report say in terms of needing to do more with the corporate business tax?
Well, GSI tries to take a broad perspective on all of the issues that we address, and this is no exception to that. So when we look at the CBT, it's not in terms of what it was and what it's going to, it's how does it compare to other states. And so what we always bring to the table is a context, and as you mentioned, it is the highest in the country, and even when it comes down to 9%, if the sunset is permitted, that we will be fourth highest in the country and highest in our region, very importantly, Bob.
Right, yeah.
So number one, it really is not sufficient to really, I think, persuade business leaders that we've changed in terms of our openness and support for businesses in the state. And certainly we can see in other states, the approaches they've taken have been very successful. So we bring a solution to the table, not only identifying the issue, but we bring solutions to the table. And that's really the heart of this report.
Right. So let's get into the report. What are some of the solutions? What are some of the recommendations that you'd like to see?
Well, based on, as I mentioned, our standing, we just think it's insufficient. And we look at what other states have done, most notably and longest term is North Carolina. But also there are other states pointed to, including Indiana in the state. And what you can see in the report is that if we take a prudent approach over multiple years and in a way in which we can see that an improvement or a decline in the corporate business tax actually draws more investment, which therefore draws more jobs, which draws more income to the state actually on a net basis. And that's the important thing to think about in this. It's not a tax that is in isolation. Our economy is an ecosystem. And when you move one thing, it impacts the other. In this case, in a positive way. More jobs means more higher wages for individuals, means they're doing more investing in the state, as well as more sales tax, more income tax. So on a net basis, we can see in North Carolina, they have moved and they're already at 2.5%. But you can see in the report, there's a tremendous increase in both employment as well as new business starts in North Carolina over the last 10 years. Indiana has followed suit, and more recently, Iowa followed suit, stepping down and watching the increase in the other income. We put what we call triggers or guardrails, right? So as the corporate business tax comes down, we watch the other income come up, and if it doesn't, then we moderate. And that's the prudent approach.
And even Pennsylvania, and I know we've talked about Pennsylvania quite a bit, they're on a path to go from, I think, 9.9%, and they just lowered it a point, and they're going to go down to 4.99% by 2031. Is that something that Jersey could possibly do?
Well, within the report, first of all, I think we can do anything we choose to do, right? It's all about leadership. And if we have leadership that is really committed to appealing to investment in the business community, absolutely. I believe, though, that Pennsylvania, and during the last gubernatorial campaign,
Yeah.
both of them said they thought if they could see the results they were expecting, they would accelerate it. And I believe that that's what's happening in the marketplace, meaning the other states are coming down more quickly. And as you say, Pennsylvania's already at 8.9, which is below us.
Yeah.
And I believe that they'll get to 4.99. And in our report, we talk about the U.S. average for corporate business taxes is about 5 to 6%. If we could just target that range, right? We don't have to be the lowest.
Right.
Nobody's claiming that. But being competitive is the most important thing.
Very good. What about in terms of the impact of having that high CBT rate for so long? How is that impacting businesses? How is it impacting jobs? How can you tell that this rate is hurting New Jersey?
Sure. Well, if you look at the report, there's really two key charts in there. When you think about the whole U.S. economy and our position in the U.S. economy, and if you think about it from a business perspective, what you see in there is as a share of the whole economy, as measured by gross domestic product, or in terms of number of residents, the total population. In both cases, New Jersey's been on a very slow decline over the last 30 years. That we've become less important to the U.S. economy and less attractive as population has grown. That's a key indicator that something is amiss in terms of our ability to take advantage of all the prosperity in the United States and take advantage of all of our assets, quite frankly. So those are key indicators that over the long term, this has been going on. And I think that's also why there's a bit of disbelief on some people's part, right? That this is important because it's been a slow, and it's not that we're not growing, it's that we're not getting our fair share of what we should, given our assets, given our geography, given our position. And I believe one of the key drivers of that lack of performance is the CBT. It's not the only thing, but it's certainly a primary thing that businesses look at.
Like you mentioned, there's not everybody who believes in this approach. We've heard from progressive groups that the CBT reduction, which they're calling a tax cut, it really kind of isn't. It's just the reduction of a temporary surcharge.
That was introduced during this administration.
Right, that's right. But their take on it is it'll blow a hole in the budget.
Right.
So how does the state, if it doesn't blow a hole in the budget, but there'll obviously be less money coming in. So how would the state cover for those reductions?
Well, as I mentioned before, right, this is a stimulative tax reduction. So one of the guardrails is, right, step it down, half point at a time, whatever, I think the legislature sees, the willingness to take those steps, put in the guardrails. We will see an increase in sales tax. We will see an increase in income tax revenues. You will have real estate transaction fees. Believe you, when you stimulate the whole economy, you just get all these benefits that come with it. And that's why it should be something that's not looked at in isolation. It's not about the individuals that are experiencing the tax reduction. It's about total revenue growth for the state. And you have to think about it, as I said before, as an ecosystem.
Right. Would the elimination of tax incentives, would that be in line if the whole ecosystem goes in this direction?
Well, it's a great question. So you have to think about, right, these incentives are because our CBT is so high. In order for us to compete for businesses, we have to offer these incentives. The more competitive your CBT is, the less requirement you have for incentives. Right now, in the report, you will see that there's over $1 billion of incentives that are currently being offered to attract businesses. So that goes away. As you step down the corporate business tax, those need for those incentives may go away completely. You get in that 5 to 6% range, which currently is the average, you may not need them. Now, it's important, as I'm commenting, right, about the other states, they're not going to stand still. Right. So as any good business leader, you have to be cognizant of where's the market going. So as we move through this, we have to keep our eye on the ball. North Carolina has already said they're going to move to zero.
Wow.
And several of the states have said their intent is to do that as well. But North Carolina, they're, as I said, 2.5%. It won't take them long to get there.
Yeah, not to make this overly political, but I believe North Carolina has a Democratic governor. Pennsylvania has a Democratic governor. So this is happening in Democratic-led states, is it not?
Absolutely. It's not a political, it's a very economic-based. And it ought to be all about, the residents,
Right.
what kind of jobs they can get in your state, the property values, and, the cost of living in the state are all things that really ought to be driving these decisions.
One of the impacts, Regina, that I've heard is the outmigration. CBT rate can impact that. How does that work?
Well, as we've talked about, right, it's a whole ecosystem. And what we looked at, though, was independent data about where income flows. And that's, I believe, one of the strongest indicators. Nothing's perfect, of course, but if you look at where income flows, there's two charts actually in the report. One is about how many states are net income gainers from New Jersey versus losers.
Got it.
And New Jersey loses income to all but two states,
What are the two?
New York and Alaska.
Must be the weather.
Yeah, right. So number one, on a net basis, every other state is feeding off of, if you want to think about it that way, New Jersey. And number two, when you look at just absolute level of AGI, or average gross income, which is the federal income reports, every year for the last 20 years, we've been on the negative side. We've had less and less, more and more transition of AGI out of New Jersey than into it. Yeah. So these are worrisome, right? For anyone in the state should be thinking about, why is it that other states are found to be more attractive? And a good portion of it is I can get a better job, I have a better cost of living, I have better home values, lower, and so on. Yeah. So I think that those are important things to also understand about why you have to think about what drives corporations' investments and which drives jobs.
Right. There are, again, detractors who feel the CBT surcharge isn't necessary, that they should maintain the surcharge here in New Jersey because it would benefit working families, and the other school of thought is, well, they can afford it. What do you say to that?
Well, it's a detriment, as I mentioned, to everybody else. Right. Like, sure, you can apply a tax, but don't deceive yourself that it won't change the behavior of that business leader, right? They have choices. It's just like, you, when you're in the market, whether you're buying a car or, buying steak, right, at the grocery store, you always have choices. Right. And these business leaders do too. So I think it's self-deceptive to think that it won't matter if you keep a tax higher than they are in other states.
They are paying attention.
Yes, absolutely.
Last question, Regina. What do you think the chances are of actually having some movement? I mean, it seems to me the discussion is there, but things in Trenton don't always move. What do you think is actually going to happen with this? I
think there's been enormous recognition when Pennsylvania took the step they did that we had to consider it. And I think there's been much more openness on both sides of the aisle for looking at this. I mean, Senator Orho's always been, being a CPA, a very strong proponent. Senator Sarlo, though, has also spoken quite publicly about the need to consider it. Whether it's over 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whether it goes from the current 11.5% down to 7% in those years. Right. Whatever the numbers of years and the actual target rate is less important than taking the step to consider it, get the confidence of the business community. That's really what this drives, honestly. It shouldn't be about tax revenues as much as it's about having a partnership with the employers in our state and having confidence that they have confidence in their government leaders, that they understand what it takes to compete and to win their business. And that, I think, will do enormous benefit for our state.
All right. Well, very good, Regina, Egea. I want to mention the title of the report. I didn't do it at the start. It's The Real Cost to New Jersey of Being an Outlier, the Impact of Steep Corporate Tax Rates. You can go to gardenstateinitiative.org and you will see the report. Regina's going to quiz you on it as soon as you're done. Regina, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
All right, we'll be back right after these words.
Treasury management is very unique at PPAC Gladstone Bank because we are empowered to do the right thing for our clients every day. Some examples of products that we provide are remote deposit, ACH, online banking, and online wires. The most important solution that we offer at the bank would be fraud prevention services. This service allows clients to detect fraud before the transaction even hits their account, which ultimately results in saving clients a lot of time and money. Our service is designed and customized by each client, and what comes along with that is 24-hour client service. You won't find that at much larger institutions, the attention that we can give to our clients. Not only are these products state-of-the-art, but they're also at the client's fingertips and can compete with any of the large institutions.
You're first. First to respond. First to put others' lives before your own. And in an emergency, you need a network that puts you first, that connects you to technology and each other, that's built with and for first responders. FirstNet, the only officially authorized wireless network for first responders. Because putting you first is our job.
Welcome back to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm Bob Considine. Well, March is Women's History Month, and the KPMG Women's PGA Championship is swinging into the legendary Baltusrol Golf Club on June 21st. So we recently got into the swing of things with Jackie Endlsey, the championship director of the KPMG Women's PGA Championship, to talk about women's empowerment and the big women's golf tournaments happening in New Jersey. Take a look. All right, Jackie. So we should point out before we get into the great golf that's going on in New Jersey this spring, it is Women's History Month here, the month of March. And I want to talk about why it's important at the Women's PGA celebrating this.
Yeah, Bob, I think one of the great things about Women's History Month is just, the trailblazers that have paved the way up until this point. I think this is the 9th iteration of our KPMG Women's PGA Championship, headed to Baltusrol Golf Club this June. And one of the great things about it is everything that it stands for. So not only a world-class golf championship, but also the KPMG Women's Leadership Summit that both serve as catalysts to empower women on and off the golf course. So not only do we represent this world-class golf championship, one of 5 LPGA majors, we also have what KPMG has done for women the past 9 years. That is trying to work with C-suite aspiring ladies to get into that C-suite.
Yeah, that is a big mission here at NJBIA as well. I was almost wondering, I know we're talking about women in the scenes at the C-suite, but even on a younger level, like young girls during tournaments, do you happen to see there's a lot more of them out there watching these tournaments?
There really are. That's one thing at the PGA of America that we aspire to do year in and year out, is really to just grow the game. And one of the great things about this championship, it has allowed young girls to really look at these professional athletes as kind of mentors, right? And
Yeah.
Learning throughout, whether it's clinics, whether it's coming to just watch them play. I think these ladies have really paved the way to set up the future generation very well.
Yeah, in a previous life, I was a sports writer too, and I remember I have covered at least some LPGA events in the past, and it always seemed like the women professional golfers were so accessible with the fans. And I wonder if that's a conscious thing, or if it's just the way they are. How does that work?
It's funny you say that. We hear that all the time. These ladies are very accessible. They're always willing to stay and sign autographs. They're willing to, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's, run a clinic or show these young girls and even young boys how to play the game. They're much more accessible. And I don't know really what that comes down to, other than the fact that I think they've grown up in a similar setting, right? They've gone through learning how to play the game and looking up to other women as they've paved their way into the spot they're in now.
Yeah. The other thing, Jackie, I've noticed is in seeing these tournaments is there's really some great sponsorship. I'm sure you don't have metrics of how well they're doing, but I would think, women's golf is something companies and corporate sponsors want to get involved with.
I think with a lot of organizations now, including or adding additional DE&I initiatives to their company mission and objectives, I think that has really seen a lot of companies branch out a little bit more and, trying to support women in a different way that they may not have alternatively done. So the result of that has been additional sponsorship of these athletes, of these ladies and these golfers. So I think the past 5 years in particular has really seen an increase in those sponsorships, which is, again, setting us up for success in the future.
Yeah. And you have something to do with it too. Come on, take a little credit. 5 years, right?
Right, exactly.
All right, so this is the year of women's golf in New Jersey. I do want to run down. We're going to get into the big championship, women's PGA KPMG women's PGA Championship at Baltusrol, but there are a few events leading up to that. There's a good lineup. You got the Cognizant Founders Cup for the LPGA from May 10th to May 14th at the Upper Montclair Country Club in Clifton. The Mizuho America's Open, which I'm not sure I'm pronouncing correctly, but you'll correct me, at Liberty National Golf in Jersey City. That's from May 30th to June 4th. And of course, the ShopRite LPGA Classic presented by Acer. That is June 7th to the 11th, always at the Seaview in Galloway Township. But the big one, as we noted, KPMG Women's PGA Championship, June 21st to June 25th at Baltusrol Golf Club in Springfield. This is one of 5 major championships?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Okay,
one of
so
5 majors on the tour.
Got it, 5 majors on the tour. And is this the first time that this event will be played at Baltusrol?
It will, Bob. So this is the first year that the KPMG Women's PGA Championship is coming to Baltusrol. Baltusrol Golf Club previously had hosted 2 women's major championships, both in the 1961 and 1985 U.S. Women's Open. So we're ecstatic to come back to Baltusrol. Prior to that, we have hosted our 2005 and 2016 PGA Championship there. So really excited to allow these female athletes to have the best test of golf on the lower course.
It is on the lower course, and
It is.
I think it might have been renovated recently, that course in particular. And also, what is?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say yes, it has. Gil Hans just came in and helped restore A.W. Tillinghaft's original vision to that lower course. So very excited. This will be the first championship that these athletes have played on.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what a clubhouse too. It's very historic. I think they call it the Tudor House. I can't remember the exact name of it. But what about the purse?
So the one great thing about this championship is we're very proud to where our purse has gone from the inception of this championship in 2015 through this year at Baltusrol in 2023. We are now up to $9 million purse, second on the LPGA Tour, closely behind the U.S. Women's Open. We did double that purse after last year's championship at Congressional Country Club in Bethesda, Maryland. So very excited for these ladies to compete for some of the highest dollars, with the winner actually receiving over $1 million in overall prize money.
I was just going to ask what the winner's share is, and that's a big number. That is a really big number. And I'll go over Jackie's previous KPMG Women's Championship she's worked at. She did one in suburban Chicago, suburban Philadelphia, 2022 in Washington, D.C., if I have this correct, and now at Baltusrol. So you're not going to tell me why this will be the best one ever out of the ones you worked on.
You know, it keeps getting better and better every year, Bob. I think the one great thing about this championship is, and you alluded to it earlier, with the increase in sponsorships, the increase in just overall awareness to women's sport in general. I think returning to the tri-state area, having hosted this championship in 2015 in Westchester, we're really excited for golf fans to come out. And as you mentioned earlier, with the Year of Women's Golf, we're really hoping that this is the culmination of the Year of Women's Golf, seeing as we are the last championship. So really looking forward to people coming out and supporting the event. Every year, we have more and more spectators that do descend upon the course that we are at. So we're really looking forward to it.
Have you noticed in all of your previous tournaments how it kind of, these big events kind of help the local economy, tourism?
Absolutely. I think, you know, we have a field of 156 players. So then you add on to their caddies and their families. Yeah. We have over 1,000 volunteers that put on this championship for us that we couldn't do without, that represent over 50, usually the 50 states. So all those people descending in and around the Springfield, New Jersey area will naturally increase dollars to the local economy.
Great. And you said 1,000 volunteers?
We do. We have over 1,000 volunteers.
So is that typically local people?
You know, typically it's primarily Baltusrol Club members, local golf fans, but then we do have those that do travel in and out, year in, year out. representing most 50 states. So it's pretty remarkable.
And the last thing I want to just hit on, Jackie, you had mentioned earlier, when we were talking earlier about kind of the collaboration between KPMG, LPGA, and the PGA of America. How long has this been going on, and what kind of growth have you seen, and what's been the positives from that marriage, I guess?
Yeah, so this will be the 9th year of the partnership. It's a wonderful collaboration between the PGA of America, KPMG, and the LPGA Tour. And back in 2015, senior leaders from all three organizations got together and thought, how can we continue to empower and advance women, not only on the golf course through a world-class golf championship, but also in advancing women into the C-suite and having more females represent in the C-suite at different organizations. So
Right.
It's really been a great relationship, and we're so proud of it going into our 9th year. One thing I did want to touch upon is our charitable initiative, which is our Future Leaders Program. So proceeds from the major championship, the KPMG Women's PGA Championship, and the KPMG Women's Leadership Summit, all proceeds do go to funding a scholarship program. So we are aiming to diversify the work field and allow seniors to apply for these scholarships that will not only get them an introduction to the game of golf, provide a mentorship program for them, but then a full 4-year scholarship for them to go to school.
All right. Well, Jackie Endlsey, we will see you out there on the links. Championship Director of KPMG's Women's PGA Championship. If you want to learn more about this, and you should, there's a great website, kpmgwomenspga.com. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Jackie Endlsey from the KPMG Women's PGA Championship. Finally, on today's Minding Your Business, we go to our recent Insights and Outlooks event at Pines Manor in Edison, where JP Morgan's Shawn Snyder talked the latest on supply chain, inflation, and investing. Take a look.
So when it comes to the stock market, and I realize that may not be at the forefront of everyone's mind here, but I just want to talk a little bit about what traditionally happens during recessions, because I think it helps you have a good mindset when these things occur. Normally what happens is when you have a drawdown and like a normal stock market correction and there's not a recession, the average drawdown is about 24%. Okay, what did we see in October last year? 25%. When you do have a recession, the average drawdown is about 31% or a little bit higher than that. And it's a little bit skewed. Global financial crisis was very significant. Tech bubble was another very significant one where you had a lot of companies without earnings. In this case, we do have a lot of tech companies with actual earnings. They've become, Apple's the new Walmart kind of thing, Amazon, etc. So I don't think that that's the case. So the reason I talk about this is, one, the downside appears to be somewhat more limited, okay, because we already priced it in 2022. Maybe not completely. I'm not saying that it couldn't go down from here, okay, right? I mean, 30%, could it be that? So, yes, maybe. If you have a recession, you could have that. But you have to factor in that we priced it in pretty quickly. So, and I think there's a very good chance that we priced it in October 2022, and that will be the low that kind of holds. So I think the market has de-risked a decent amount well in advance. And why did it do that? It's really unusual because normally the stock market would bottom about halfway through recession. But this time around, you have the second potentially engineered recession in a row, right? So we engineered a recession with COVID. We are engineering a recession this time to get rid of inflation. And it's extremely well telegraphed. The Fed told us what they were going to do, so the market moved well in advance. And I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind. The other thing I want to point out about traditional patterns in the stock market is that the performance, the 12 months after its bottom, is normally very, very strong in the 1 year after. So if you go back to the past recessions and you look back, say, like 9, 10, 12 recessions, the average return in the 12 months that follow that market bottom is about 41%. So recoveries happen very rapidly and very quickly. Is this what we're seeing so far in January? I think it's maybe too early to say that, but I bring out the point because, when we see these pockets of volatility, I just think it's important to remember that these downtrends are often followed by very sharp uptrends afterward.
Okay, thank you, Shawn Snyder from JP Morgan, and thank you for joining us on NJBIA's Minding Your Business. We'll see you next time.